Hello, good evening, and welcome back. So the BBC had launched their educational segments in order to try and help children throughout the homeschooling period when they aren't able to go to school, and to try and enable some more qualified education being broadcasted into people's homes, because for whatever reason, I suppose they don't have access to online resources, but nonetheless, let's presume the good intent was there. Well, except the latest debacle from this is, as the Mail reports, fury at BBC homeschooling programme that tells pupils physics teachers are grumpy, scary and smell of cabbage. And this isn't a kind of horrible histories thing, whereby of course they're going to make these, I wouldn't quite say snide remarks, but more mildly offensive jokes in order to make the message more memorable. Instead, it just seems to be a cheap shot in order to try and put humour in without really having any basis for it. However, the pushing out the narrative is something that we've been going on for a while, that of course if it's physics or if it's just science in general, then that is empirical testing, not just theoretical, and it is dealing with the real world, and that is something that the left and the BBC included do not wish to deal with, because that destroys their narratives and the agenda that they're trying to push. But it might go some way as to explain why Leicester University has ditched Chaucer, it's decolonising its syllabus, and marks International Women's Week, so not just women, but for anybody who identifies as women, to try and be more inclusive. Yes, so the idea is more people are going to identify as Wimixin than women. I think the echo chamber's gone a bit far there, mate. And that is because they're failing. They've lost a lot of funding. They got a new vice president on, and he's thinking, oh, hang on, if I'm on £250,000 a year income, I need to shake things up a bit, and definitely going more woke is a way to make it more popular. So let's start off with how they're going after the children before we get after how they're going for the children who have extended their childhood for the cost of their adulthood. So this was from actor and radio host Sel Spellman, who said physics teachers were grumpy and scary. Dr. Adam Rutherford criticised presenter for ridiculous remarks on BBC Bite Size. And Spellman's comments have also come under fire by people on social media, which is a given. You could take that either way, except, of course, with all the censoring that's going on at the minute, I didn't think we were allowed to disagree with them. So, BBC's come under fire from an eminent scientist after a presenter told schoolchildren physics teachers were grumpy, scary and smell of cabbage. Sel Spellman, a former Radio 1 host and TV actor, made a ridiculous remark during an introduction on BBC Bite Size, the online study resource that educating children at home while schools are closed during the lockdown. And as I say, if you are in this position, chances are you've got better things to teach them anyway, but you can go to someone like Patriotic Alternative, should you wish to get a syllabus yourself, or if you have particular things in mind that you wish to teach the children about but are not aware of the resources yourself, you can go to where the exam modules are, whether that be AQA or somewhere similar, and go through the mock papers and research the questions and around it. And of course you can use resources like Khan Academy, which has been proven to be incredibly popular and helpful for students. It's a resource I used myself as well. You can use things like PBS Spacetime or Numberphile or Computerphile, should you wish to get a better grounding in the area. And of course, other more popular channels like Vsauce and Veritasium also go to help get people interested in science, especially young people. So they're definitely more worthwhile resources if you have an internet connection. If you're watching this, you have an internet connection. Instead of having to rely on the BBC. Because let's not forget that you've been given a fantastic opportunity of being able to avoid state-run education, which means you can avoid state-run education. And of course that includes the BBC, as it is essentially, pragmatically, state-run. So you can actually tune out, and you've got so many other options. You can see what your children are learning, and you can choose to point them in a different direction. So Dr. Adam Rutherford, a geneticist and author who hosts the BBC Radio 4 show Inside Science, called Spellman's comments shameful, embarrassing and anti-educational. He added that it served none of the BBC's values. He said this colour actor casually slagging off physics teachers on the BBC is shameful, embarrassing and anti-educational. It serves none of the BBC's values. Don't be so sure about that, mate, because if people go into science, then they might be taught critical thinking. And, critical thinking definitely goes against the BBC's values. So I think they're trying to cut them off at the pass and helping people to just accept dogma instead of thinking for themselves. But moving on into how to try and push the narrative in a way that would affect them the most, trying to fight them on their own grounds, if you will. He says, these anti-intellectual stereotypes are why we have such cultural ignorance about scientific practice, which fuel conspiracy theories about climate change or vaccines or pandemics. Yep. So, his take, line me if I'm wrong, is the reason that we have people not trusting scientists is because they wish to do research and see where the evidence leads, instead of just believing what they're told at face value. Well, isn't that the point of science? Is critical thinking and is having disagreements and then seeing where the evidence leads. And you may end up disagreeing with somebody, but then you'll research and find out what they know and end up agreeing with their conclusion. Isn't that the point of science? That science is not based on however many people agree with it, whether it be the majority or the minority. It is simply based on facts of life. And if you do enough research, you will reach the same conclusion as someone else. Isn't that the point? So you can have those conspiracy theories, because surely the people that have the conspiracy theories are more interested in it, and therefore you can look into more evidence and details and reach the same conclusion. For example, when he's mentioning conspiracy theories about climate change or vaccines or pandemics, how much research would he have done into these, which he's calling conspiracy theories? How well would he be able to debunk somebody who goes against his claims, who's looked into it a great deal? Would he just say that's nonsense, definitely not, without knowing what they're talking about? Or, of course, vice versa. But let's face it, that's not true. If you've spoken to somebody who is a so-called conspiracy theorist, you'd probably be quite amazed at just how much they know about a topic. And I'm the same. If I speak to a so-called conspiracy theorist, then more often than not, I'll end up going with, well, you seem to know more than I do. I don't know enough in order to be an authoritative source on the topic, but please tell me more, enlighten me, show me where to look into it of the things that you know, and I'll compare that to what I found out already, and we'll see where we go from there. Isn't that the way that science should work? That you take on more evidence as it comes to light? No? Okay. But just to go into more effect for their own values, that he's saying that this is the kind of thing that discourages girls from going into science, and saying that it's, as I say, these stereotypes are damaging. It's stuff similar to this that tells girls they can't do physics, or that science is for nerds, not cool kids. I mean, secondly, that it's for nerds, not cool kids. I mean, surely it basically is. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And surely you've got to be able to stand up to scrutiny and shouldn't just be going with the flow. Again, isn't science about being an individual thinker instead of just going with the flow? But maybe I'm missing what science has become. Because what has it become? Well, Leicester gives a great example, of course. As I say, they are a struggling university, let's put it that way, in saying that they've missed out on funding, which you could put down to the lockdown, that people aren't wishing to attend universities or, try and find a place at universities because they don't think that they'll be able to go there, in which case, what's the point in paying for it if you're not receiving the education? You might as well just stay with your parents for another year, because there's not much else you can do. By all means, try and get a job, but chances are that's not really going to happen, seeing as there are minimum wage laws and jobs are in short supply at the minute, because there's not a lot we're allowed to do. Then not so many people will be going to university, understandably. However, it was named Britain's University of the Year in 2008, which was only 12 years ago, so it seems to have fallen quite a long way, as it has a heritage that encompassed great thinkers such as novelist Malcolm Bradbury, a former student poet Philip Larkin, one of its old librarians, and Sir David Attenborough, who lived on the attractive campus as a child. It was home to nearly 23,000 students. Exactly a decade ago, Leicester came 17th in The Guardian University Guide's National League tables, and was also top university for student satisfaction outside Oxbridge. So it was doing well. However, of course, it's thought that, as the Vice-Chancellor, as I say, Professor Nishan Kanagaraja, whose just name sounds like a plunger being used, on his £250,000 annual salary, that he is trying to decolonise the curriculum in an attempt to try and revitalise it from failing where it has gone. And the document announced from him an ambitious £1 billion investment plan to build state-of-the-art new facilities that would allow student numbers to grow to 25,000. I don't think capacity is the problem at the minute, mate, because, as I say, that was then, but things didn't exactly work out, and is ranked a lowly 77th out of the UK's 121 universities, according to the most recent Guardian League table. And the student numbers have dropped to 18,338, and are falling by around 4% annually. The intake was a mere 2,855, down from 3.5 a year earlier, while the overall number of international students dropped from just over 5 to just under 5,000. Since then, the coronavirus is only likely to have made things worse. Well, of course, but then you would have seen other universities affected. So when it comes down to be comparatively, so in its rankings, for example, then that isn't going to be affected by the COOF. Or if it is, it's going to be negligible, because everyone's going to be affected in a very, very similar manner. So in terms of their political correctness, or their woke university, what they've got here is, on Wednesday, staff were abruptly told by their superiors that they want to drop Geoffrey Chaucer and other great medieval writers from the syllabus, because, of course, of being, racist or sexist or, such buzzwords, in order to be more diverse, which is supposed to reflect what the students are asking for. But is it the students, or is it just the lefty professors who are envious that somebody without a degree and hasn't gone through university and is in tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds in debt, can get a better paying job for them because they are a more useful member of society? And therefore these lefty professors see socialism as the only way out, because the market must be wrong, because the university professor can't have made a mistake. Definitely not. And they're definitely more valuable teaching whatever it is they're teaching than a self-employed plumber who is making sure that people have drinkable water. Clearly, English literature is more important. But in an attempt to push this forward, they're going with the diversity in order to reflect the multicultural and multi-gendered and the multitude of variations between students, and to put the students first, not the students' education first, but just the students' opinions first. Not try to educate them, but instead try to placate them. As they go on to say, not just Chaucer, but also they got text as Beowulf, Milton's Paradise Lost, and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And the work of John Donne and Christopher Marlowe will also reportedly be sidelined. In the place will come a diverse array of modern writers, many of whom cover such modest topics as race relations and feminism. You've got to train the new army. This will allow Leicester's New Look English course to cover what the email describes as a chronological literary history, a selection of modules on race, ethnicity, sexuality and diversity, a decolonised curriculum, and new employability modules. The last one is an out-and-out lie. But the idea of saying a selection of modules on race and decolonised curriculum is essentially just Britain bad, and then the sexuality and diversity is to say straightness bad, and they didn't quite mention that genders there, which would just, of course, mean male bad. And this still goes again with the university fee caps of £9,000 a year. Who'll be studying under this? But of course, it gets worse. As in the press release, Leicester has named two of the writers who will remain on the curriculum as the African-American novelists, Toni Morrison and Colston Whitehead. Of course, who called Colston, which was the surname of the 17th century slave trader whose statue was pulled down and thrown into Bristol Harbour last June. That is an aside, but is worth noting, seeing as this kind of thing would not be acceptable if it were to be the other way around, even if it is just an honest mistake, of course. Should the proposals come to pass, around 60 academic staff will lose their jobs. Yep. Diversity of thought is the diversity that is definitely not allowed. Critics already chanting on dumbing down that error may be a final straw. Education Secretary Gavin Williamson this week accused the university of an absolute madness, while even the ultra-liberal University and College Union dubbed the plans short-sighted and intellectually void. So perhaps there might be hope. But this is from the same university that is, supposed to be groups of encouraging British heritage, but at the same time encouraging titles like the Green and Unpleasant Land, trying to say that England is just basically always been full of slavery and anything good was built off the backs of slaves, which is patently false. And if you wish to go back to the slave trade, then perhaps you should look at the Vikings and the Earl of Wessex. But I don't think they wish to go back that far when, of course, England's were more likely to be slaves than slave owners, because that's quite an unfortunate footnote for them to push their narrative. And that is just keeping it domestic. Well, I mean, Vikings as the invaders, but that is saying Britons are slaves, not as in the people that other countries have kept as slaves. Because bear in mind that pretty much until the Enlightenment, slavery did run rampant globally and was kept domestic. It was essentially just an understanding of war that if you beat out an opponent, that you would either kill them or keep them as slaves. And for an institution that likes to point out things like the gender wage gap, using their own way, which is to average male and female incomes, regardless of jobs that they work or hours that they work, that by using that same formula for them, according to the university's most recent gender pay gap report, its female staff currently earn 82% of what their male counterparts earn. Moreover, it reveals that men who work there are nearly 50% more likely than women employees to get a bonus, and when they do, that bonus tends to be 66% bigger. Then in June, at the height of Black Lives Matter protests, Professor Plunger gave a prominent interview to the Press Association in which he declared that universities must do more to diversify their workforce and recruit more staff and students from ethnic minorities. He argued that minority teaching staff, who represent roughly 14% of Leicester's payroll, were chronically absent across British higher education. Oh, you seem to be hiring more ethnic minority teachers, right, and you're also slipping the rankings. One of your policies isn't working, if not more than one. Which ones do you think it is? Do you think it's hiring people based on skin colour instead of merit? It could be. But that's it for me. We've seen how the establishment is trying to dumb down education anyway, whether it will be from early learning of the BBC. I suppose the government just couldn't have a big enough stranglehold on education and therefore, needed to push it more by making sure everybody was taught the exact same thing, which could be regulated by the state before it went out, as they do with the BBC. And then, of course, when things get further on, we see what the cathedral is pushing with universities such as Leicester here. But that's it for me. So as always, let me know what you guys think down below. Do you think there is any hope left in institutions which used to be the pride of the world, with Oxford being the second oldest university in the world, and that we can actually rise again with our academic institutions? Or if you think it's time to just tap out, leave it alone, encourage people to go down other routes, they will find their education through those endeavours, and then the few people who wish to take their academic adventures more seriously will still be able to team up, learn together, get the mentors, and re-establish universities in a new way, which is what they were meant for in the beginning, but has long since been forgotten. Either way, let me know down below. Always intrigued to hear what you guys have to say, and as always, until next time, have a good one.